to order. Please join me in observing a moment of silence, and I ask that if you have a cell phone, please make sure that it's on silent or shut off. Councilwoman Reed, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I apologize, I meant Councilwoman Clark. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
You did last meeting.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Domingo, please read the roll.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Lawler.
Here.
Spicer.
Here.
Williamson.
Here.
And Mayor Atchison.
Here. Okay, first item is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Support.
Okay, if there are no corrections, additions, or deletions, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. Okay, presentations and recognitions. First, we have a proclamation designating March 2020 as March for Meals Month. Okay. I'll join you at the podium. Wrong one. There we go. Proclamation designated March 2020 as the 18th annual March of Meals Month. Whereas on March 22nd, 1972, President Richard Nixon signed into law a measure that amended the Older Americans Act of 1965 and established a national nutrition program for seniors 60 years of age and older. And whereas Meals on Wheels America established a March for Meals campaign in March 2002 to recognize the historic month, the importance of the Older Americans Act nutrition programs, both congregate and home delivered, and raise awareness about the escalating problem of senior hunger in America. And whereas the 2020 observance of March for Meals celebrates 18 years, providing an opportunity to support Meals on Wheels programs that deliver vital and critical services by donating, volunteering, and raising awareness about senior hunger and isolation. And whereas Volunteers for Meals on Wheels programs in Albion are the backbone of the program, and they not only deliver nutritious meals to seniors and individuals with disabilities who are at significant risk of hunger and isolation, but also caring concern and attention to their welfare. And whereas Meals on Wheels program in Albion, Michigan provides nutritious meals to seniors throughout the Albion, Michigan area that help them maintain their health and independence, and thereby preventing unnecessary falls, hospitalizations, and or premature institutionalization. And whereas Meals on Wheels programs in Albion provide a powerful socialization opportunity for millions of seniors to help combat the negative health effects and economic consequences of loneliness and isolation. And whereas Meals on Wheels program in Albion, Michigan deserve recognition for the contributions they have made and will continue to make to local communities, our state, and our nation. Now, therefore, I, David Atchison, as Mayor of Albion, Michigan, do hereby proclaim March 2020 as the 18th annual March for Meals Month, and urge every citizen to take this month to honor our recognition of and involvement in the National 2020 March for Meals. Our recognition of and involvement in the National 2020 March for Meals can enrich our entire community and help combat senior hunger and isolation in America. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and cause the official seal of Albion, Michigan on the second day of March of the year 2020.
I'd just like to let you know how much of an impact we've been able to have. First of all, my name's Karen Scullion. I'm the Calhoun County Supervisor for Meals on Wheels. And last year in Southwest Michigan, we were able to serve 491,584 meals to our seniors. And 1 out of those 4 seniors, we're the only people that they see all day and talk to. And 9 out of 10 of those seniors will tell you that our service helps them to live independently, most of them within their own homes. And it's just a great honor to do this service, and I really thank you all for this right here. Thank you.
I would say my wife and I, we do deliveries one day a month, and
Thank you
it's about
so
the
much.
highlight of the month because everybody is so happy to see us.
Oh, they truly
And
are.
sometimes I take my little pugs with me into the senior over at Maple Grove, and that's always a big hit. But everybody's always very happy and very, very talkative and very
Oh,
appreciative.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
thank you for the
I truly
program.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a proclamation recognizing March as Women's History Month. Okay. Proclamation recognizing March as Women's History Month. Whereas on March 12, 1987, the U.S. Congress passed Public Law 100-9, which designated the month of March Women's History Month. And whereas Albion women have historically played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of the life of our community as educators, mentors, religious leaders, and by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. And whereas Albion women have played a unique role throughout our local history by providing most of the volunteer labor, and whereas women were important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions across our nation, and particularly here in Albion, and whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement, and whereas American women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, and the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas the 2020 Women's History Month theme is Valiant Women of the Vote, honoring the brave women who fought to win suffrage rights for women and for the women who continue to fight for the voting rights of others. And whereas 2020 marks the centennial of the 19th Amendment and the culmination of the women's suffrage moment. Now, therefore, I, David Atchison, as Mayor of Albion, do hereby proclaim March 2020 as Women's History Month in Albion and urge every citizen to take this month to honor the achievements of women. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the official seal of Albion, Michigan on the second day of March in the year 2020. I pay particular honor to my women colleagues on council, Ms. Domingo, our city clerk, and women in the audience and at home. Thank you all. Okay. Next, we have a presentation on preventing marijuana abuse by youth, presented by the Albion Homer Substance Abuse Coalition.
Good evening. My name is Maurice Berry. I am co-chair of the Community That Cares Task Force and a member of the Albion Homer Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, and also a parent in Mr. Bonner's Cross Ages Mentoring Program. I'm here to give a brief assessment of the Albion youth marijuana use from where I see it, and having a unique relationship with most of the teens in the area, and working with Dr. Bonner and Dr. Bonner's mentoring program in my direct connection to most of the targeted population and their families in the area, and also being a father of 5 African-American males, ranging in age from 3 to 32, and watching my oldest struggle with drugs and losing the battle. Ended up in prison and serving time for being under the influence of drugs. I personally hold myself responsible for that because as a youth, all he seen was me in the drug lifestyle. And so as a result of that and serving prison time myself, I dedicated my life to helping my kids as well as the kids in my area. And working with Mr. Bonner, who you will hear tonight, asked for the Consul's assistance in developing programs and activities around marijuana use to help prevent the use of marijuana use in teens. Excuse me. Most of the kids, especially the ones that I have a unique relationship with, I see on a personal basis day to day. I see these kids using marijuana up and down the street. They're able to purchase cigarette products from some of the local stores. And, you know, it's just a common practice to get some of this stuff out and make these kids aware that this is a dangerous behavior. And through the work with Mr. Bonner, I've been able to have an impact in these kids' life and help bring that message to the forefront. Our current mission has Mr. Bonner also asking for the help of the council and working together to develop those programs and the programs needed to help bring the issues of this marijuana use to the forefront so that these kids can get the help they need. Any other things you'd like to say, Mr. Bonner?
Yes, I'm Harry Bonner, and I think most of you know that it's been my career in my life working with young people and the community as a whole. Seen a lot of young people suffer from the use of marijuana and other different drugs. What I wanted to do, and I have talked with several people about this, including the prosecutor, Dave Gilbert, and Chief Kip. We want to ask that members of the council, at least 3 of you, and I've already interviewed and talked to 2 or 3 of you guys, try to reach my other person today, and she wasn't available today. But I'm asking that 3 of you work with us to research this whole issue of marijuana use so that we want to be able to do something that would be a model for the other cities to utilize. And so what we would do is utilize our staff resources and some of the other resources from around the state to look at this whole issue of marijuana use, vaporing, prescription drugs, alcohol use, and then be able to come back to the council with a plan about what part belongs to the council, what part belongs to law enforcement, what part belongs to parents, what part belongs to the community, and then to see and get feedback from the council on what you guys' policy would be around this serious issue. But it would be based on research. It also would include your city attorney on the legal ends of it. And again, this is something that has not been done in this area that I know of, and so that's what the discussion is about, to leave it with you guys' hand. Most of you guys, at one point in time, I had worked with anyway on various programs, but this is specifically around the issue of substance use and abuse. So that's my and Maurice's talk. So we'll take questions if you have any right now.
Councilwoman Reed.
I don't have a question, but I think it's a very good idea because when I was teaching school, and I had kids that were six years old, and they would come to school with different things that was marijuana use in their pockets and things because they got it from home. And I guess that's the thing that really bothered me about the recreational marijuana. If it's not really taken care of by the adults, the children are going to get involved.
Okay, those are all good points. So what we're going to do instead of having, we're not talking about the major issue of the medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. We're going to talk about the impact that recreational use have on youth, and then we will do the research to come back. This is what the research says, and then the council can have that as a means of looking at what the impact, like you say, whether coming out of the home, grandparents' home, friends' home, all of that, and like Marie said, Maurice is a living testimony to what the impact can be, but he also is a living testimony of what can happen when that impact turns into positive action about trying to address it. So I think people should give Maurice a credit and applause for being willing to stand up and basically say, these are things that I have been involved in, but also my children have been involved in. Just a lot of credit to do that. So.
I don't want to personally thank you, Mr. Berry, for being willing to do that. And I know you're extremely active with the youth here in Albion, and I very much appreciate that. And Dr. Bonner, you're a figure around here, extremely well respected, and I think that your request and recommendation for 3 members of council to work with you on this project is a great idea. I'll ask if we have council members. I'm already involved with you, so that leaves a space for 2 council members. Councilmember Smith, and draw straws, do sleight of hand or whatever.
We would love to have both, and we'll work out about all the other, what kind of conflicts or whatever it may have. But we also would ask that there's people in the audience who also want to join this research, because again, it will be a model. Already talked to Senator Bison and Representative Osmond about being able to recognize these efforts at the state level. So again, it's an opportunity for Albion to be on the forefront of developing something that like I said, I don't know that this has been done before.
So Councilman Smith, myself, then we'll talk with the two of you and figure out which one has got the lead, okay? All right. We'll get
Sounds
back to you.
reasonable. We appreciate it. If there's no more questions, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have no public hearing this evening. Next section is public comments. And this is public comments on agenda items. Request that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Ask everyone to be respectful. And I remind the public that our rules of procedure prohibit maligning city employees, other members of the public, or members of council. Please don't impugn their motives if you have something to speak about on the agenda. So if we have someone that wants to come forward and make a public comment.
Good evening, Council. Garrett Brown, 1016 South Superior Street. Getting up just to address the agenda item regarding the item H, requesting approval to waive attorney-client privilege and publicly release a third-party investigation report. The purpose of that, I believe, was to, one, bring some clarity to the public about competing allegations. And so I think it's imperative that the public receive the full report, unredacted, so we can be able to understand from an investigatory perspective whether what was alleged was actually justified. And then I also feel that one of the main campaign promises in the last election was a commitment to transparency. And so to not do that would be completely against that promise that was made to the voters for transparency. And then also the fact that, and I've mentioned this over and over in different, both at council meetings and online, is that the city is really facing a big issue with leaking information, because what my understanding is that was a personnel matter. So the fact that that even got out to City Watch and John Face was troubling. And so I think that's been ongoing, and hopefully this brings some clarity to that. So I think that was the second part of the investigation. So I'm just encouraging you all to release the full report, unredacted, because again, all of you are public servants, and if someone came out and accused you of doing something, and then there was an investigation of it, you would want that released to have a full public awareness of what took place. So I'm encouraging you all to vote yes for agenda item H. Thank you.
Thank you. We have further public comments this evening?
Sonia Brown, 713 Orchard Drive. I, too, ask council to vote to approve item H, making the investigation report available to the public. It involves me. And I know over the past year, the city has had a major problem with the leaking of confidential and inappropriate information, along with false narratives. So I think that the second part of the investigation may bring some clarity to that, and I think the public deserves to know who. As far as the complaint that was filed against me, as I said back in December, I want the truth to come out. I want my name cleared. And now that the investigation is complete, I don't see how council cannot vote to make this public. Transparency is important, but it needs to be the 100% truth when we're being transparent and talking about transparency. So I urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wayne Arnold, 906 Hall Street. You know, I think us old folks, at least the ones I talk to, is ready to put a period behind, you know, all this chaotic and infighting and stuff that's going on. Now, Councilman Brown has been removed. Everything was done, but if it's some information that is clear, who wouldn't want their name clear? You know what I'm saying? She's been adamant that it's something out there that's going to, you know, clean up her reputation. So if it's going to clear her reputation, I think by all means, yeah, you got to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have further public comments on agenda items this evening? Seeing none, we'll close public comments. Next, the mayor requests a closed session under the Opens Meeting Act, Section 15.26H, Public Act 267 as amended, to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute. This pertains to having a discussion with council and our city attorney. So council has the opportunity to ask whatever questions before we come back and make a decision on whether we waive attorney-client privileges. So may I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Domingo, would you call the roll? And again, this is to go into closed session.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Reed. Smith.
Yes.
Lawler.
Yes.
Spicer.
Yes.
Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Call this meeting back to order. Mr. Domingo, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Lawler.
Here.
Spicer.
Here.
Williamson.
Here.
And Mayor Atchison.
Here. Next item is approval of the consent calendars. Approval of regular session minutes for February 18th, and approval of the traffic control order that effective immediately, the travel lanes on North Albion Street Bridge shall be reduced by 6 feet in each direction from each sidewalk curb in accordance with the attached engineer schematic to redirect traffic to the center of the bridge using appropriate construction barrels or other lawful lightweight barricade. Yield signals shall be placed immediately before the approaches to the bridge from each direction to instruct motors to yield to traffic already in transit across the bridge. May I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, consent calendar is approved. All right. Next item is request approval of the second reading and adoption of ordinance 2020-02, an ordinance to amend Chapter 22, Article 4, to amend Sections 22-181 and 22-183, outdoor and sidewalk cafes. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. City Attorney, would you give us an overview, please?
Sure. So this was the outdoor cafe ordinance that Councilmember Williamson had brought up at previous council meetings. We made 2 changes to the ordinance. Under sections 22-181, areas of applicability, as the council's aware, we recently underwent basically a zoning ordinance rewrite, and so it formerly had business districts that effectively no longer exist. So we've modified it to now refer to the CBD district, the commercial business district, and the outdoor cafe applies to the CBD or the MU district, which is the mixed use. The other change that we made was to section 22-183, specifically subsection C. We've expanded the time of operation, particularly since we've had an unseasonably warm winter this year and the tail end of last year. We basically added a month on either end, such now that the seasonal permit will be from March 1 up to December 1. Obviously, if the weather does not permit, I doubt any of the businesses will be operating those days, but they now have the option if the weather accommodates as such. I'm happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Okay, if I can first get the folks in the gallery to hold your conversation outside, I appreciate that. If there's questions by council? Any questions by council? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
We do a roll call.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem. So, Mr. Domingo, would you read the roll? This is to approve the second reading and adoption of ordinance 2020-02, an ordinance to amend Chapter 22, Article 4, to amend sections 22-181 and 22-183 outdoor and sidewalk cafes. A yes vote is to approve it, no vote is not.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Lawler,
Yes.
Spicer,
Yes.
Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Okay. Next item is discussion of Juneteenth celebration. And I'd ask Councilwoman Reed to take the lead on this, since you always take the lead on planning for us.
Juneteenth this year is going to be June 20th. It's going to be hopefully held in Holland Park. Last year we ran into rain and had to move it to the junior high, to where the junior high used to be. So this year, we're hoping that we're going to be able to have it outside and that we have the pavilion up by then. It's going to be similar to what it was, except we've got a lot of other things that we've added it in because we want to make it an intergenerational day. So we're going to have things for everybody from the little bitty kids to our elderly seniors. And we're in the process now of making some more plans because we're trying to get it all set up to where we have the food trucks and the things like that. So we've got all the paperwork and stuff ready to go out, but we are having one more meeting and before we actually send things out to make sure that we've got it all in order. So we're asking the city to please, the street out here, Cass Street, is a mess. I actually went out and measured holes that are this deep. Now, we always start out here at City Hall after we get the proclamation from the mayor, and we walk down to the park, which is at the end of this street, at the end of Cass Street. And it's going to be very dangerous walking unless those holes are filled in. So since we got that new patch, it would be nice if the city could get the street so that it'll be safe for walking on. Let's see. We plan on having live music and different things like that all day, and then at the end, as we usually do, we're going to have a gospel fest. The plans on it is going good. We're just inviting everybody in Albion to please come. We're sending out letters to all the churches again, organizations, and inviting them to come and spend the day with us. It's Juneteenth with us and help us celebrate.
Questions or comments by council? Okay. I would hope that we can get every member of council to attend and participate. This should be a very proud moment for Albion. I would also ask that every member of council, almost every one of us, attend one or more churches or affiliated with churches and other civic nonprofit organizations, and ask that we personally step up and take the lead, talking to our ministers and other local ministers and other civic organizations, and ask them to have a presence and participate. Between Councilman Smith and I think we can persuade and have a representation of the American Legion there. I know that Mr. Davis, Art Davis, is identified on here, but we have other African-American members of our local post. We'll get those names to you. We'll make sure they get invited. So if we can all pull together on this and reach out to, across the community and get a large turnout, and just every year continue to see it grow.
Yeah, we would like the veterans, we would like to recognize them. Mr. Davis was last year going to give the speech about, because it was the military that went in and delivered the paperwork to Texas, and so that's why we were inviting them in. Yeah. Once we get all of the plans actually tacked down to how they're really going to be, I will present you with another copy of it all, so you'll have.
It might be appropriate to extend an invitation to any former mayor or council member who's living in the general area to attend and participate.
Exactly.
it just would be good to see a very large turnout from the community because it's appropriate, and this should be a very proud moment for our community. Any other, yes, Councilwoman Lawler.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it, does the council think it is appropriate to, I know you said invite former mayors, but Mayor Wheaton, would it be a good idea for me to invite his wife just to do something? She is in my precinct, so I just want to make her feel comfortable.
I think that if we can get a list of the dignitaries, special attendees, we can publicly acknowledge them and make sure they're treated with the honor that they deserve.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and I'm sure that Councilwoman Reed is looking for more ideas and other things and suggestions from other members of council. No?
We got some. We don't know what to do with them, no.
Well, I wasn't prepared for that, but, okay. Thank you. All right. Next is a discussion, approval of the fee for special events. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
Okay. Discussion. All right. And our city manager gave us a recommendation on what he felt would be an appropriate fee based on what it costs the city to process that. I believe that was $35. Beg pardon?
50.
Oh, I've got that wrong, okay. So is there any further discussion by council or questions? Councilman Smith?
I just wanted to clarify,
50 years.
this also takes in the serving and sale of alcohol during these events. Just want to know where the boundaries are going to be drawn on something like that. I mean, right now we have, we allow sales of alcohol in very limited areas, even with permits.
City Attorney Hartness.
So I can probably give you some information. There are different types of license, like special event licenses or temporary licenses that can be obtained from the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. If, for example, an event is going to be within a certain distance to a school or a place of religious worship, part of the application requires that they get basically permission from those places to have it within those distances. They require the Chief of Public Safety to sign off on them. So, I mean, Liquor Control Commission will have the final word on some of that. And certainly, if the council wants to modify the ordinance such that you're restricting it from certain places, you can. But I think your bases are going to be covered with the restrictions that Liquor Control puts on there, because you're going to have to get the okays from those churches, schools, things like that, to even have it anywhere near them.
I just wanted to make sure that, they had boundaries set.
Sure.
Like, inside the orange fence.
Oh, yes. So as part of the application process, I'm sorry, I didn't completely get what you're saying. They are required to add a diagram to the applications showing the specific area and how it's going to be contained. And service can only occur within the bounded area.
Perfect, thank you.
Any further comments or questions by council? Mr. Mingo, would you read the? Oh, sorry, City Attorney, go ahead.
So I know that that we've got a recommended fee here. I just want to point out that our ordinance requires us to adopt it by resolution. And I don't believe we have a resolution tonight.
Okay.
So we can certainly prepare one for the next meeting, but thank you. That's because what the ordinance requires.
Okay. Will any member of council have an issue with the fee set at $50? Okay. So if you would prepare that for the next meeting.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Next item is the discussion for code enforcement priorities. Would you like to lead off? No.
I know you were working on it.
No, we did. So I can get. So this is just a discussion. This is not an action.
Right.
Associated with that, I can. Councilwoman Clark, feel free to join me at any point in time where I might misrepresent something. So Councilwoman Clark and I met with Director Tracy and City Manager McCleary to discuss code enforcement. And it turns out nothing is as simple as it sounds. And so we were inundated with lots of information about what's being done now. A couple of key points to take away from the meeting is that we currently do not have a code enforcement officer as a full-time code enforcement person. That person's been promoted and moved into a new position within the city. So Director Tracy is currently in charge of all of it, not just a piece of it. So you can imagine that the bandwidth there is limited. The other takeaway is that there is definitely a need for additional code enforcement help. Manager McCleary indicated that the city is working on a budget for 2021 that could potentially include multiple code enforcement officers, that there has been some synergy between applicants at the Department of Public Safety and with the Department of Code Enforcement, Zoning and Planning, to maybe wrangle people in through that into eventual public safety roles, so that there's so it's kind of recruitment into the city. My personal takeaway from the meeting is that we don't really know what we don't know. We really don't have a definitive number of how many rental properties are in the city. We have what we have from 2010, which is in the last census. We don't have a good handle on how many actual violations are with living conditions. There's some really good data over the last year or two with the code enforcement officers we have around waste bin, waste refusal, things like that. There's some really good numbers, and this person's actually out doing something, which is good. But as far as priorities go, we weren't able to have, in the limited time that we met, a real conversation about what is a priority. What's our top level? How are we going to enforce it? How are we going to pay for it? It was a wide-ranging conversation that was clear needed to continue, and I think okay, good, I'm on the right path. I think we left with a lot more questions than we did answers, and that's okay. That's what happens when you start to dive deep into a specific issue. But I think it highlights, for many of us on council, especially the folks who are working on rental certification, that we have a lot of groundwork to cover before we start to pass wide ranging policy in the city around specific subsets of the community, whether it be landlords, whether it be single occupancy homeowners, etc. So I think we are generating a list of things that need to be done, and are going to be working with Manager McCleary and other interested parties in the city to bring something to council forward in the near future around what needs to be done in order to begin developing policy around code enforcement. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. And to be a little bit clear, some of the information we asked that it would be done quickly. So probably by the next meeting, we should be able to present some concrete numbers of some of the questions that's been asked by the city. Because I just think that we need to answer some of their questions first, and then anybody that's listening or watching on TV, I would ask that you would contact either Shane or myself to of any concerns or anything that you specifically think are hot items, and we can bring that to them the next time we meet.
So one question, you said that there was good data, a lot of data over the last year and a half on trash cans sitting out on the curb, and what else?
Well, how we've been enforcing the current code, which has mainly been around waste refuse bins, parking, structures that are like cars that are just sitting on property that can't move. Okay. Things that are very I drove by and I saw it, or someone called and complained, so I went and did it. So there were lots, in the hundreds. I think over 700. It was a lot of those. Very minimal on the stuff that we are actually concerned about when it comes to, is this place a safe place to live? So we have lots of work to do to get to a point where we can start to actually talk about instituting wide-ranging rental certification policy. But I think that it will make the case. I think one of the things that we realize in talking is that when you come with data and you are making data-driven decisions, you make the case to the folks who are going to have to deal with the implications. So Right now, we don't have a lot of that, and so we need to move towards that and study it and do the right thing before we start to move on to big actions.
Okay.
And at the end of it, people still might be really upset, but we will have done the job that we needed to do. No one can fault the process at that point.
So when this has come up before, a member of the community has made the recommendation that things like trash cans sitting on the curb, cars parked on lawns, grass that's, and weeds that are over the, pretty straightforward, visible things. The member of the community recommended and asked, why could we not get individuals that are willing to volunteer, give them training, and they can take a digital picture, provide the information so that when we do get the position filled, that individual isn't focusing on those things. So I would ask that when you and Councilwoman Clark are going through this, at least consider if that's a viable option. And of course, you'll need to talk with the city manager, Mr. Tracy, and the city attorney. But to me, that's an idea I think that has merit.
And we did discuss that. We did discuss.
Okay, great.
And also discuss some of the people that we know that already do that type of thing and volunteer and do that type of thing for the city, without asking for anybody to recognize them or anything else. Because we realize that in the big essence of it, we realize 2 people is not enough to get things done. So that's something else that we're looking forward, having some ideas and things of how we can employ other people, such as volunteers, or even maybe having somebody as temporaries or whatever. So it was a full range of discussion.
Super. Okay. Any other questions, comments by council? Okay. Next item is discussion of a 4-day work week, and I'll invite the city manager to lead off on that.
Your Honor, members of council, this is just a discussion item for tonight, but as I'm going through and trying to fill key positions within the city, it's become abundantly clear to me that we are very limited in the incentives that we can provide to attract quality talent to work for the city. We've got financial limitations. There's only so much we can do to be competitive from a financial standpoint with some of our comparable communities in the region and throughout the state. So we're trying to come up with creative ways to make working for the city of Albion attractive to potential employees as well as to current employees, so that we can retain our good talent that are not necessarily a cost or much of a cost to the city. One of the ideas that has come up is moving to a 4-day work week, expanding the number of hours that City Hall employees work during the week from Monday through Thursday, and expanding those business hours, and instead being closed on Fridays. I've outlined for the council a number of benefits to moving to that type of system. There are many communities across the state who have moved to a 4-day work week with expanded hours. So we would be looking at either opening at 7 o'clock a.m. rather than 8 o'clock a.m. and going to 6 p.m. for City Hall business hours, Monday through Thursday, or 8 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and then being closed on Fridays. We believe that this would be convenient for a lot of citizens who work during the normal business hours and have a hard time getting to City Hall to do business because they work at the same time that City Hall is open. But it also provides a number of benefits to city employees as well. It condenses the work week. It we believe that it would increase productivity, since employees would have longer rest periods, having a 3-day weekend rather than a 2-day weekend to recuperate before they return to work, and other benefits. So we have discussed this as city staff, and our staff is very supportive of this concept. So I told them that I would bring it to council for discussion and hopefully for your support in moving forward.
Thank you. Questions by council? Councilwoman Reed. Unless somebody else was first.
She was first.
Okay, Councilman Spicer.
Thank you. City Manager McCleary, I understand you presented the 4-day work week, but as an option. But is there any benefit or consideration been given to a staggered work day with employees? Or is it because, some begin at 10 and work later, some start at 8 and get off at 5? I mean, has that even been considered, or do we not have sufficient staff to do something like that?
During the management, one of our management team meetings, we talked about the different options. The problem is with the small staff that we have and the need to, especially in departments like the finance department, where we need to have other staff be able to fill in when people are on lunch breaks and what have you, it makes it very difficult to be able to have a staggered work schedule. So we did talk about that. We looked at that as an option. We did not believe that it would be feasible.
Councilwoman Reed.
I was just kind of thinking, water bills and things like that have due dates that they're due on. And what happens when a person's due date is on a Friday and they don't get paid until Friday? So they're going to come on Friday to pay the bills so that they don't have to pay extra. But there's no Friday. So are you going to
is a very
rework
good point.
days?
We would have to, it would probably require us to
Change billing days.
change our due dates to make sure that we are allowing for people to pay on the due dates during the days that we are open to the public. So there would be some adjustment needed in that regard.
Councilman Clark.
So I kind of want to just put another twist to this, because I've heard complaints from people in the city about the fact that they feel like a lot of times when they come down here, there's not proper representation in the building when they come on certain days, such as Friday, as of now. And they're not too happy about that. Because, and I'll speak personally, I know I've come down here on a few Fridays and before 4 o'clock and the building is practically empty. So, they feel like their needs aren't being met by the city in that way, and then for us to turn around and then look at it as far as being a cost savings and taking a day away from some people that maybe can't even do anything such as pay their bills, except for on Fridays when they get paid, would be difficult. And I'm sure we would make some kind of adjustment for that. But at the same time, I think before we start to implement things like that, I think we need to show the city more of a support and more things that we're doing and availability. And maybe you guys should maybe revisit the fact of doing a staggered shift, and then possibly in the future look at that before we just completely shut off a day. Because, again, this is stuff that I'm hearing from the public.
Okay. Councilman Smith.
Just to throw another monkey wrench in the works, just an idea to maybe address that issue. And I realize that you are short-staffed, but possibly do one group would work Monday through Thursday, another group would work Tuesday through Friday. That way all 5 days are still covered. But I realize you do have short staff, just an option.
And how many total employees would be impacted by this?
We would have probably about, I want to say, 10 or 12 employees.
Okay. And would this have an impact on overtime or any of those 10 to 12 employees working overtime now?
No, it would not impact the hours worked or overtime in any way.
Okay.
The employees would still be working 40 hours per week. It would just be condensed into a 4-day work week rather than a 5-day work week. We would have to negotiate with the union. Actually, the union has already come on board and said they're in support of this concept. So they're willing to sit down and work out contract language changes to make it happen, but we would have to work out that language with them.
I have one last question, then I'll yield to you.
Oh, no, go for
Okay.
it, go for it.
So part of the reason for bringing this forward is you're saying that it is getting increasingly difficult to hire and retain quality people. And I'm wondering if you could give us a little more detail as to what that's based on. People retire for a variety of reasons, but are you really having problems filling positions and you're not getting people that want to stay here?
Well, I think it's not just a matter of attracting talent. It's also a matter of keeping good talent. And as the council is aware, the salaries that we pay, the salaries and wages that we pay here are lower than a lot of other communities provide. And we want to make sure that we're being competitive in some way. There's only so much we can do financially. We want to try to attract the best talent pool we can. That's the best answer I can give you, Mayor. I can't give you specifics at this time.
Last question, and that is, over the last 18 months, how many people have left because they didn't want to stay here and weren't getting paid enough or whatever, that you're aware of?
I have not done that research, so I can't tell you.
Okay.
Why I have not researched why each person has left.
Okay. Councilman Williamson.
Okay, I have a couple things to ask. Well, again, these are more questions and concerns. So my first concern is, like, I wonder how many job postings do we currently have at City Hall right now? Because we've been talking about staffing for a while, and you're saying, I mean, through this particular measure, you're saying you're having a hard time finding talent or attracting talent. So I want to know how many postings we actually have out and how many interviews have we done. I just want more. I want more information. So I want to know, like, what talent are we missing out on by having City Hall open 5 days a week? There's a lot of ambiguous language around productivity. What does increased productivity look like, and what standard measurement are we using to say that we're productive right now? And if we move to 4 days, what does increased productivity look like? Because I would contend that seeing these schedules implemented elsewhere, that you would actually decrease productivity because the wear and tear over a 4-day period is much harder, and then people breathe for 3 days, and then they come back and do it again, a hard 10-hour day for 4 days. So I'm just wondering, like, what measurements you're going to use to actually define success in moving towards this type of schedule, because again, we're blocking City Hall off another day during the week that citizens would need to have access to it. So again, I think I would want more data, hard data, real, measurable things, and also where have they done this in other municipalities where it actually makes sense, and what were their successes in that. And then also be a little more transparent in where have they done it and then gone back, or where has it not worked? Because I'd like to see the pros and cons of this. So that's my thought moving forward on this particular issue.
Councilwoman Reed.
I think that maybe when we have a town hall meeting, when we have it, we should discuss it with the people, because they're the ones that we're serving. So. I think it would be a good idea to get their viewpoint on how they think it ought to be too.
Councilwoman Spicer.
Thank you. Just from my experience from an HR perspective, and as an employee, a 4-day work week can be very attractive when the pay is not that great. People always tend to want to work a couple extra hours a day in lieu of having an extended weekend, be it Friday or Monday. So I think that, I know you haven't gotten all the bugs and kinks worked out yet, and this is just a topic for discussion, so we're not making decisions here. But I think that you might be onto something. You talked to the city staff or employees, and they said that, they like the idea. Sometimes, I think you would be hard pressed to find employers where they do have a 4-day work week in lieu of 5-day because of extended hours. So I think that it's an attractive alternative when the salary is not so great. And sometimes it's even attractive when there is salary. People a lot of employees are just for an extended weekend. I know I'd love to be off on Friday and work 4 days, and so anyways, thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Councilman Williamson.
I just want another data point to think about when considering this. I think we've said this over and over again, even just during this discussion. We don't pay enough, or we're low. We have a low compensation rate in the city of Albion, and I'd like to know compared to what, compared to who, and where do we fall on the trend lines for a city that looks like ours versus because anecdotally, the city manager in Ann Arbor makes like $300,000 a year. Of course, you're not making that in Albion. So I would like to know, like, MML probably has some of this information, but what's the rate comparison for positions at City Hall compared to other municipalities like ours? Because just in my short time of being on council, no one is paid poorly, from my experience. Like we're not very bottom of the barrel in compensating people. People do get paid here, but I would like to know where we fall in the trends with cities like ours, with budgets similar to ours, with services similar to ours. So, thank you.
City Manager.
Just to respond to that, I apologize if I gave the impression that we're at the bottom of the barrel. We are not. But the compensation levels that we have here are low, and we don't. And I just want to say, we have to think not only in terms of for communities our size or with our financial condition, because we don't just compete with communities that are in the same financial condition we're in. We compete with other communities our size who are in better financial condition. And so that's the whole point of this, is to try to come up with other ways that we can be competitive with those communities that do have a higher advantage to attract the talent. We do compete with communities that are of better means than we are. It's an attempt to try to attract the best talent we can, not using financial resources, but using alternative means.
Councilman Williamson.
Really quickly off the top of your head, can you answer how many job postings the city has out for city positions and how many applicants we've had?
City Hall or citywide?
City Hall.
City Hall, we have 4 positions that are either posted or getting very close to being posted. So I apologize. I'm counting 2 positions that are in public services. We have 2 or 3 in City Hall.
A couple of meetings ago, you gave us a list of staff positions that were open. Have all of those been posted?
Not all of them. And the reason for that is that some of the positions are that we have to fill the top positions first to see if we are promoting employees in, because that creates other vacancies that then we have to fill. So we've got to start at the top and work our way down.
Any other questions by council? Okay. Next is a discussion of adult use marijuana establishments. I'm sorry?
Did we do F?
We did,
Oh, did I skip over the credit card? Yes, I did. My apologies. Okay, request approval of the proposed new credit card purchase card policy for the city of Albion, which requires additional authorization before any changes and/or modifications, including the issuance of additional cards, can be made to the city's credit card account. This will significantly reduce the potential for financial loss or misuse. May I have a motion?
so moved.
Is there support?
Go for it.
Okay, discussion. And I'll ask you to lead us through that. City Manager?
Your Honor, this policy amendment was drafted by our finance director. It helps to ensure that we are properly addressing the security of our credit cards. It also takes into account the requirements because we are moving to a purchasing card program. Tom's back there, I don't know if he wants to address it, but we're going to a purchasing card program, and under the new program, our credit cards are going to be leveraged by funds that we set aside in a special account. And so this policy takes into account that process as well. Tom, I don't know if there's something you wanted to add to that?
I think you explained it fairly well, unless there are questions, or, I mean, I guess the biggest thing is we just took the current policy that we had, which was done by City Manager Mitchell, or Dr. Mitchell, when she was here, so it wasn't terribly old. However, there were some weaknesses, as we discovered, with our previous city manager. So we looked at these, and actually we started drafting this prior to City Manager McQuarrie's arrival. Well, I can't remember if it was prior to, it was around the time he came, we started looking at this process. So at the time, I'm pretty sure he was still city manager at the time, but Police Chief Kip helped with this, and having his background in law enforcement, of course, helped as well too. So anyway, all we really did is basically kind of provided some extra level of authorization in there so that one person, like in the past, can't open and close accounts and determine who gets cards and determine where the bills get sent and all that. Everything now will be on at least two-person, the finance director and city manager. And then we have provisions, so if one is vacant, like the assistant or acting person would do that. So if that helps explain, that was the biggest change with what we've done with the policy.
Question for you. It authorizes that a credit card may be issued to the mayor. And I'm wondering, as your time here as the finance director, have credit cards ever been issued to the mayor? And more importantly, have they ever been used by the mayor?
I'm not aware of it, but that actually was just carried forward from the previous policy, so we left it in there.
I'd ask you to consider whether or not there's a great reason for having it to be issued to the mayor. It seems that it does kind of present the opportunity, the mayor, the senior elected official, and other than the people of the community who holds the mayor accountable, the rest of council, but they're not viewing the credit card bills or anything else. And if in your time as the finance director, and I'd also ask our city manager in your 3 decades of experience, is how often does the mayor need a credit card? So I just think that we could do away with that, and it wouldn't have any impact, and it would remove potential for abuse. So do you have any experience with mayors using city credit cards?
I have never had an experience where the mayor was issued a credit card.
Okay. Right. So that's my only comment on it. Any other? Councilwoman Lawler?
Thank you, Mayor. This may be a little bit off, but are we going after our 6,500?
Yeah, it is off.
This was a question.
The answer is yes.
Thank you.
One thing I might add too, just to give you a little bit of an explanation as to why we switched directions with this, or the primary reason we switched directions to what they call this purchase card, or a lot of people refer to it as P card, I guess. Typically you see a lot in bigger organizations like counties, in larger cities and stuff, but the big thing that I like about this card is, under the prior card, it was an individual would be given, you give that credit card company the individual who has the authorization to do whatever. I mean, you're dealing with credit cards, MasterCard or Visa or whatever, you're dealing with some company out of state, and you're telling them this is the person that's authorized by the city to do transactions. When we had the problem last time, we had a terrible time getting that account closed because none of us were that authorized individual. So with this new card, not only do we have the two levels, but it's a local or a bank that we can deal with right here. It's Flagstar actually, but they were the only bank that responded with this product when we put it out for soliciting the bids on it. But the big difference is we can go online 24/7, and if there's as soon as we see there's an abuse on the account, we can shut it off immediately. Or if an employee leaves or is terminated, I mean, we can. So we have 24/7 control on all the cards right now. So that's the big thing that I've noticed.
Any other comments by council? Okay. So could we consider it a friendly amendment to eliminate the mayor from those who may be issued credit cards? Is there any objection by council? Okay. So if there's no other comments, I'll ask Mr. Mingo to read the roll to approve Resolution 2016-18, a resolution amending the credit card policy and procedures for the City of Albion pursuant to Public Act 266 of 1995, with the one change of eliminating the mayor from paragraph 1.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Lawler,
Yes.
Spicer,
Yes.
Williamson,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
and Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Okay. Next item is discussion of adult use marijuana establishments. And for clarification, establishments is not just limited to retail outlet, marijuana consumption venues, that kind of thing. It's any kind of facility or establishment that is involved with recreational marijuana. I asked this to be put on here so that we could have a discussion. We had a local businessman, Mr. Mark Goodman, businessman here locally, who has a license for medical marijuana and has constructed a facility, but with the legalization of recreational marijuana, he's telling us that he's essentially out of business because he can't grow it and sell it just within the medical community, because the demand for medical marijuana use cards is almost evaporated now that it is legal. So maybe all those medical marijuana cards weren't really necessary, but at any rate. So he's asked for this. It seems like a reasonable request that we at least have a discussion. And I think in light of the presentation by the Albion Homer Substance Abuse, Dr. Bonner and Mr. Berry, asking for council to work with them to research and come back with information, we certainly could go ahead and have a discussion, but before we have the benefit of that additional information, it seems to me we'd be well advised not to make any changes to the ordinance, but open it up to other members of council that want to bring up points or ask questions about this. Councilwoman Lawler.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we know if he planned to grow recreational marijuana?
If he gets a license to, yes.
And he will use those buildings out there that he purchased to do that?
That's what he says. So,
Thank you.
Councilman Smith?
I believe the gentleman also mentioned that he was the owner of one of the provisioning centers on Eaton Street. So he would also be selling it on a retail level.
Only if that permit was issued.
That permit was issued.
City Attorney.
As a point of clarification, the gentleman that spoke, my understanding is he has multiple Class C licenses. It's either 4 or 5 Class C licenses, 1 processor license, and then 1 dispensary license. Provisioning center, excuse me, license.
Thank you. Council Williamson.
So my 2 cents on recreational marijuana in the city of Albion is that I agree with what we've done so far in opting out of the current Michigan state rules around medical marijuana. I think there are too many unknowns in how it's working out in municipalities around the state of Michigan. I also want to be respectful of the majority by a large amount in Albion, Michigan, who supported the legalization of recreational marijuana. And so as the other municipalities figure out how they're doing this in an appropriate way in their community that is safe and also not harmful to children and young adults, that we too will need to consider this at a committee level of some kind in the future to discuss how it looks in our community. Because again, just like with medical, you don't have to have dispensaries provision centers. There's all this new language we're learning around it. Basically, you don't have to have tons of retail centers. You don't have to have, you could do just growing and shipping out. But I think that it's worth having a discussion with the community about how that looks moving forward, because it was clear by a long shot that the city of Albion was supportive of recreational marijuana access in their community. So I think that we need to be respectful of that moving forward and not just say we don't want recreational marijuana, so we're done. I think that would fly in the face of what many of our council members have gotten put in council to do. So I'm done.
City Attorney.
So what I wanted to, one of the things that the mayor touched on is with the passage of Initiated Law 1 of 2018, which is what in effect created the adult use marijuana in Michigan. Basically, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it rendered medical marijuana moot except for a very small demographic, which is those persons under the age of 21, because for those individuals, marijuana would not be legal except in a medical sense. Mm-hmm. So for anybody that's 21 and older, they can take advantage of the adult use, but not anyone under that age demographic. What I've provided to council are a couple sample ordinances from some other municipalities. There's one from Lansing. I believe the other 2 are from Battle Creek and Ann Arbor. To give you some ideas what some other municipalities are doing, I can tell you I was actually in a meeting last week with the deputy city attorney for Lansing, and they just started issuing their first adult use licenses. It's been a very slow, painstaking process for them. I know Ann Arbor kind of jumped right into it. Leone Township jumped right into it. And I mean, speaking from experience with Leone Township, because I do special counsel work for them, they were one of the first municipalities to get into both medical marijuana and adult use, and they've had a lot of stumbles along the way. And so I think there's a certain amount of wisdom in taking advantage of that crawl before you walk type of approach. Now, that being said, I would agree with, I think, the majority of council. I'm certainly not looking to stifle any of these businesses, but it's new for the entire state. So, I mean, it's going to not come without issues.
Council.
I have another question to you, and maybe Colin can help me with this, but from the licensing standpoint, could we potentially, for business owners who already have operations where they're growing medical marijuana in Albion, could we potentially give them a special type of license to then be able to grow recreational? They still can't sell it, but it allows them to grow their business and employ more people, but they're actually growing and selling it probably elsewhere. I think that's what the gentleman last week was indicating. Yeah. So very much like the medical the state statute on medical, the adult use statute has its own variation of its different types of businesses. Many of them are almost identical to the medical side in that
They have grow, processing, secure transport, safety compliance. They have changed dispensary to retail establishment, which is sales, and then they've added in some other kind of unique aspects such as designated consumption centers, micro businesses, marijuana events, things like that. But the state statute allows you to basically pick and choose. Do we want to have
A menu.
yeah, only have grow and processing, I mean, basically any of those, you can say, well, we're gonna allow those. I think if the council decides to go down that road, much like with the medical, I'll recommend that you put caps on the number of facilities. I can tell you, again, from experience, I represent some municipalities that did not do that, and one in particular in a neighboring county ended up with over 90 licenses and has now put a moratorium in place so that they can lose some by attrition. So for the municipality of this size, I think you need to keep in mind, I think 20 was a good number. And I would probably recommend the same thing, but yeah, you can absolutely limit the number and the type of facility. The one thing that I will say though, that is a hot topic, at least in what I'll refer to as marijuana law, is that we cannot prohibit any of the adult use facilities from operating at the same locations as medical facilities. So if you're going to say, we're going to allow a grow, it can operate at the exact same location as medical. So we can't arbitrarily say, well, medical is going to be on this side of town, adult use has to be on this side of town.
Councilwoman Lawler.
Thank you, Mayor. Have we thought about the criminal aspect of it as far as break-ins, and could we get like some feedback from maybe the chief about how we would look at the perspective of possible criminal activity?
You can certainly ask the chief that. I can tell you it, to a certain extent, has been putting marijuana, whether it's medical or adult use, and money in one location is always going to present the opportunity for crime. Part of the design of the licensing structure, in that it allows us to charge a $5,000 fee, the city can allocate a certain portion of that. In fact, I believe we did with medical, towards trying to curb crime associated with these facilities. But, I mean, the chief might be able to speak more directly to.
Councilman Williamson.
I wanted to add that, so when this, when the new marijuana law basically went into effect, the state of Michigan named priority communities around communities that were over-policed in excess for marijuana violations, Albion being one of them, with high rates of conviction and arrests related to over-enforcement of the law around marijuana. And because of that, when we decide what we're doing with recreational marijuana in the community of Albion, there is state assistance available to help business people, and specifically those who were overly targeted for marijuana use pre the law, to be able to get up and running and operating genuine businesses that support their livelihoods. So just want to keep in mind for all of council that we are sitting on resources that could be given to people who want to run businesses in our community related to the law, who are actually victims of the over-application of the law prior to. So there are many sides to the implementation of recreational marijuana, and so I just wanted to make sure I shared that with council.
Councilman Clark.
So I guess I welcome the information that we're going to get from Mr. Bonner when he distributes it out to us, and I'm looking forward to that, because there's a perception, this is my opinion, there's a perception that marijuana does not create other issues in other people's lives, and that is something that I want to come forth and want to bring it out as an educational piece, because if we all face it, nobody starts smoking marijuana when there's a small percentage that starts smoking marijuana after 18. And that's my concern.
Okay. City Attorney.
The last thing I would add to council is, when you look through these materials, and you can see some of the sample ordinances, different municipalities are, of course, doing different things, and the city we can craft our ordinance basically whatever suits the city the best. But one thing that I will tell you, and that I'll strongly recommend, is that as we get into this, I would strongly recommend that the city not do what's referred to as the marijuana events, which is basically public events where people smoke outside. The problem is I don't even need to explain the problems. You can see the inherent problems with it. The designated consumption lounges, which are basically marijuana bars, and the last one is the marijuana micro businesses. And the reason I bring that one up is from what I'm told from other municipal attorneys that have communities that have those particular businesses, is because they operate on such a small level and they lack usually the capitalization that some of the larger facilities have. They tend to not be as compliant with the administrative rules, local ordinances, and things of that nature. And so I think it's a potential headache the city can avoid outright. So,
thank you. Any other comments by council? Okay. No. All right. Next up is request approval to waive attorney-client privilege and publicly release the third-party investigation report submitted by Thrun Law Firm. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay. Is there discussion? Okay. City Attorney.
So one thing that I brought up to the council the last time we did this, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the content contained within this particular opinion, but I would like to stress to council that obviously waiving attorney-client privilege is a very, very significant thing, and that it should be done in the most extreme of circumstances. I understand the reasoning why council is considering releasing the opinion, but I would just stress that this could, you don't want to get into the habit of waiving attorney-client privilege, because it's not something to be taken lightly. The courts don't take it lightly. It's one of the most strictly enforced privileges there are in the law. So I just want to make that clear to council. And again, that would apply whether it was this opinion or an opinion issued by my office or otherwise. So.
All right. So I'll ask Ms. Domingo to read the roll, and if you vote yes, you're voting to waive attorney-client privilege and publicly release the investigation report. Yes, Councilman Clark.
So with that being said, is there any way that we could just have the two people or the parties that were involved, just have the information and leave it there? Because that's what's more needs to be.
You could, but there's absolutely no way council can control whether or not those two individuals will release it themselves.
So would you please read the roll?
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes, privilege.
Spicer,
Yes.
Williamson,
No.
Clark,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Okay. So I'd ask the city attorney just to kind of summarize the report and the city manager to have the full report posted on the city's website so people can access it.
So I can just give the broad strokes here. This was a report compiled by attorney Tim Gardner of Truman Law Firm. The generalized findings are as follows: as it relates to the dissemination of the chief's August 13th, 2019 complaint. Mr. Gardner was unable to determine how or by whom that complaint was released, and so he had no evidence to indicate how that complaint was released. As it relates to the allegations of harassment, Mr. Gardner goes into a discussion about how harassment requires basically conduct based on a protected class. Since there was no specific protected class as part of the complaint, legally it was not harassment. He indicates, as it relates to the claim of defamation, the city is entitled to governmental immunity, so that even if the statements were defamation, the city would be protected by governmental immunity, and such that a viable claim of defamation likely does not exist. He found that some of the former councilwoman's conduct violated Section 5.8 of the city's charter. He found that our former councilwoman's conduct violated Ordinance 1-28, which is our ethics ordinance. He found that our former councilwoman's conduct superseded her service to the, and this is a quote, superseded her service to the citizens and resulted in violation of the ordinances and charter. And that's just a very brief synopsis of his findings, and it's a very lengthy, very detailed 14-page opinion.
Okay. Any other questions by council? All right. Council Williamson.
Now that there's now the report is being made public, what options does council have going forward with any repercussions from that report?
As it relates to the violations of the ethics ordinance, realistically, the ethics ordinance only applies while a council member is in office, because that is an ordinance enforced by the rest of council. As it relates to a charter violation, that is a misdemeanor and could be prosecuted just like any other ordinance of the city.
Thank you.
What's the penalty for?
90 days, 500.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions by council? All right. Next item, request approval of the city manager performance review process. We've discussed this before. The process is to utilize the same evaluation format that's been done in the past. May I have a motion?
So move.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay. So that's the process that we use. We're coming up on 6 months. Would you please read the roll?
Councilmember Spicer,
Yes.
Williamson,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Council Williamson?
Question about the performance review process. So since there's so many, there are so many stakeholders in this process, including the city manager, including other folks, is there some interest in having maybe a kickoff meeting where we explain the tool, explain how to do the tool, get everyone in one room? It might have to be open because the council's part of it.
We eliminated the stakeholder 360 review for
You
this
did.
evolution. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Update on the city sidewalk committee. And I know you touch on it in your city manager's report, but if you would give us the highlights there, Mr. McCleary.
Your Honor, members of council, the city sidewalk committee has not yet met. They are scheduled to meet Thursday evening at 6:00 p.m. in the mayor's office. So we will hopefully have something to report after that meeting.
Give us the names of the members on the committee.
I don't have the list with me, Your Honor.
Okay. If you could send an email out to council letting us know. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, next item is discuss the submission of the Kalamazoo River restoration ideas. I'll turn to you on that one, Mr. McCleary.
Your Honor, members of council, I met a few weeks ago with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Division to discuss the funding, the $25 million in funding that is available for the Kalamazoo River restoration. There appears to be quite a bit of interest on the part of the state in allocating some of the funding, and I'm just telling you what my perception is. allocating some of the funding to the city of Albion because of our unique location at the convergence of both the south and north branches of the Kalamazoo River. We had about a 2-hour meeting. My impression is that they want to look at projects that involve looking at the feasibility of removing dams within the community. We have 5 dams, the largest one being the Albion Dam at Victory Park. And so we talked about the possibility of looking at the feasibility of all 5 dams being removed or just focusing on the Albion Dam. The consensus was that we should try to include a request to do all 5 dams. We also talked about the possibility of including restoration of the retaining walls that we have along the river. As you know, they were put in many, many years ago. They're starting to crumble. They need some work, so that was discussed as well. But I welcome the opportunity to have a discussion on any other ideas council members might have.
Any questions by Councilman Smith?
I appreciate all that. And of course, the part of the river that I have in my precinct is above the Albion Dam. So there are no retaining walls or anything like that to talk about. We do have, it is a large area that's used as an estuary by many different types of birds, fish, and other types of wildlife, and has been for years to my knowledge. I came up here in the 50s and 60s and played in the Kalamazoo River with my cousins right there. So I know that part has been there a long time. My big concern is that if they do take out all the dams, and I'm sure there will be studies done on it, how much of the depth or width of that river will be gone because there will no longer be a dam there, and how much of that wildlife habitat is going to be lost because of that, and how many of my residents are going to lose riverfront footage. So those are my main concerns. We'll talk about Barnes Park later.
Councilman Williamson.
I was just going to note for the residents in Precinct 6, the river runs right up behind people's houses, and we happen to be below the Albion Dam. So just keeping in mind that there might be some, I know in other communities where this is done, there are sometimes homes and things that don't make it. So, yeah, so we need to hopefully, yes, I'm supportive of definitely outsourcing resources to improve our community, but just being careful of how many people we're going to affect in that process.
I should note that the funding would be to fund the study of the feasibility of the dams. I also talked to them about making sure that we were funding a study to restore the dam as well, and looking at that as another option, because we really need to look at both options, make sure that we are comparing both options, both in terms of cost, in terms of environmental impact, and all of the other impacts. So we really need to gather information on both sides of the issue. And they believe that that funding would be available to do both studies.
Perfect. Any other questions by council? Well, I'm glad that you also talked to them about restoring the retaining walls. So I appreciate that. Okay. Next item, request approval of the 3-year lease agreement with Karen Chevrolet in the amount of $538.81 and $781.81. Do it signing for the 2020 Chevrolet Blazer, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute any necessary documents on behalf of the city which may be required to effectuate the same. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, any discussion? Councilman Smith?
Well, reading the city manager's summary sheet in here, I think we all see 3 letters in there that might cause us pause. IRS. Is this the IRS we're all kind of thinking of? Or, okay. Why are we in bed with the IRS to buy city vehicles?
I believe, and I'll ask you to clarify if I got this wrong, is we have a designated IRS, one of our safety, police, our public safety officers works with the IRS in those matters, and we get reimbursed for the cost of the vehicle that he uses to perform those functions. Did I get that pretty much right?
Yes. Do they pay part?
No, go ahead.
Do they pay part of the salary? Who's working for them? Or do we just get a free car?
Well, actually, I think they do, but Chief Kip will fill us in. Oh, by the way, it's not Chief Kip.
Chief Kip, Public Safety. We actually have 2 officers that are task force officers with the IRS, Deputy Chief Kern and Detective Sergeant Wygant. Deputy Chief Kern has had a vehicle that's been funded through the IRS now since, I think, 2011. And Detective Wygant's had one for the last 3 years. This will be a renewal of that lease for 3 more years.
But the question was, does the IRS fund part of their...
They fund quite a bit of equipment that we get from them. They also fund any overtime that they do while working on the task force.
So they cover the cost of the officer while performing their duty?
If it's on overtime. Generally, yes, but there's some duties that they do while they're on duty as well at times.
We get a free car.
They also bought us $20,000 worth of radios last year as well, so they're pretty lenient with the money that they give us. I think the budget right now with them is about $45,000 that they pay for.
Radios at one time?
Didn't we get a mobile kitchen or something from them too?
Oh, that's a different program.
Oh.
Has the IRS ever failed to reimburse any of the expenses that have been submitted?
No.
Thank you. Any other questions by council? Okay, Mr. Megan, would you read the roll?
Councilmember Williamson,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Smith,
Sure, yes.
Spicer,
Yes.
and Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Okay. Future agenda items. City Attorney.
Just the resolution for the alcohol event fee, which I can have ready for the next meeting.
Councilman Clark.
For the code enforcement, for us to have some data.
And update us on that.
Maybe it can be a presentation.
And for the presentation, for them to answer some of the questions that, as far as how many rentals we have and things like that.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. I will ask to put on the next meeting a resolution to approve Kent Phillips to purchase additional service time at no cost to the city in order that he may retire early. The resolution language as provided by MML. Let's see. I'd ask for an update on the demolition of Union Steel within the forthcoming 2 weeks. If we have any residents that have issues, complaints, problems, and just a general update on where we are with the demolition. Councilman Williamson?
Could we also add to the next agenda discussion on any kind of repercussions related to the report being released tonight?
Let me finish mine and then I'll come to you.
That's all,
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's all right. There'll be some board and commission appointments. I'll provide the names to our city clerk and she can verify whether or not they have passed vetting. That would be for the DDA, possibly the Recreation Committee and the Albion Building Authority. And as we've discussed, we'd like to get an update on filling the city employee vacancies. I'd like an update for council on what the city policy on city-issued personal cell phones and the disposition of any outstanding debts. And we've already got the code enforcement. And now, sir, what did you want to add?
a discussion item around whether, discussion/action item around taking any action related to the report that got released tonight, the third-party report.
Okay, any other future agenda items? City Attorney.
I'm sorry, I should have,
No, that's okay.
It just clicked on me. Councilman Lawler had brought up the debt owed to the city by the former city manager, and I'm happy to provide council with an update on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Not a future agenda item, but we do currently have scheduled a city town hall meeting for next Monday, the 9th of March. And I'd like to reschedule that if we can do it Tuesday the 10th. The reason being, NAACP is hosting a community meeting on the 2020 census. Make sure people get registered, the importance of voting, and I do not want to have a conflict with that, and I myself want to attend that meeting. So can council members look at their calendar quickly and see if Tuesday, well, we won't do it on Tuesday, will we? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's the primary.
I'll ask you to send something out and get people's input on when we can reschedule that. Okay. One of the items that'll be on that town hall meeting, we may invite Mr. Dunklin to come and summarize the Get Out the Vote Census 2020. Not get out the vote, but register for Census 2020 if he's willing to do that. I've spoken with the CEO of Oaklawn Hospital, and they will provide a representative to update the community on the current status of the coronavirus and precautions and whatnot. And I know that our city manager is working with the head of public safety and the directors, and so we'll have something to add on that. I'd ask other council members if you have items you want to make sure we discuss and get on that town hall meeting. And I know we want to provide the residents an opportunity to ask questions and so on and so forth. And perhaps that's another opportunity to get input from the community on retail sales of recreational marijuana. You and I have a slightly different opinion, but it's okay. All right. So I'm going to ask the city clerk to send out a doodle poll or whatever it's called so that we can pick a date to reschedule that town hall meeting. Okay. Let's see. Next is if there are no other future agenda items, we'll open it up for public comment. People addressing the city council, please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Proper decorum is required. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Garrett Brown, 1016 South Superior Street. 3 things. One, I want to thank the city manager for his forward-thinking recommendations to look into shortening those 4 days. Cities are changing. Michigan's changing. With the next census, they're estimating we might lose 1 congressional seat. So I think that it is important that cities take those tough stances and really investigate all those things because, again, Albion does not look like it did 50 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. And so I think we really do need to be forward-looking and making sure that the city is financially solvent going forward. The other thing is regarding the marijuana thing. So when I hear that, I hear a generational issue. I hear as Councilmember Williamson was saying, a racial justice issue there. The war against drugs did great damage to communities of color. And so I think even right now, as the state is trying to remedy that by the voters decriminalizing it, but then also, like he said, targeting areas that have low income to allow people who were convicted under some of those drug policies to benefit in the economic windfall that comes from the legalization of marijuana is a good thing, and I think it's the economic component to it that we don't want to miss out on because, as the city attorney said, there are 5 different types of licenses, so you don't have to do a provisioning/dispensary, but there's nothing wrong with growing or processing or testing because, if I remember correctly, in the ordinance for the medical marijuana ordinance, there were actually guidelines about how to secure the building with fencing and different types of making sure that the air in the building doesn't escape. So a lot of that stuff, if you go back and read the medical marijuana ordinance, some of that might be addressed. I think it's in response to Councilmember Lawler's question. And then finally, to thank the council for agenda item H for approving the release of that. One of the things that I would recommend the council doing, unless it's already covered in the Code of Ethics, but I think there needs to be some really specific language. The council should adopt it about leaking, because it's hard to determine a leak if someone's not, subpoenaed or put under a deposition. People don't tell the truth, and it's hard for an investigator to do that. So I think that that has been a major issue with the city, its governments for the past several years, and especially when it's utilized as like I said, a political weapon. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne Arnold, 906 Hall Street. Ms. Clark and Mr. Williamson, thank you tremendously for getting this code enforcement deal on the road. I mean, I've been trying for 4 or 5 years to get the code to do their job, so thank you for that. And we'll await your follow-up on that. Oh, Mayor, I got a question. Last year, we was discussing that money that was left over from the sidewalk fund. How much was that, and did we create a fund for that, or it just stays in the fund that is in right now?
I'll give you an answer at the end. Not during your time.
Oh, I try to get a public response. Okay. Thank you.
I will give you a public response. I just not during the middle of your time. That's all.
Oh, you don't have.
Levada Weeks, 917 Luther Drive. Have we done anything on Granger? I think their contract is up at the end of March. Are we all set? I don't think I've heard anything. Have
Get you an answer.
Have I?
Sonia Brown, 713 Orchard Drive. I am thanking council for voting the way I asked and making this report public. I'm looking forward to reading the whole 14 pages. So I've already submitted my FOIA, Ms. Domingo, Clerk Domingo. But so I just wanted to thank you publicly. I've gotten up here every meeting and ask, and thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City Manager. My name is Bob Dunklin, President of the Albion branch of the NAACP. I come before you tonight because just to share with you on next Monday night, the NAACP is collaborating with the Ford Institute to bring representatives from the Census Bureau here to Albion to talk about the importance of completing the census. The census is only done every 10 years, as I speak to the community, every 10 years. And it's very important that we complete those forms and get them turned back in. So often, we lose out on funding for our community because those census are not filled out correctly. So I ask you to please come out next Monday night, 6:30 at the London Center. Matter of fact, if I can approach, I have a few flyers here. Let me share, and you can share, please. And as I speak to the community also, next Tuesday, we vote. So please, the primary is next Tuesday. Come out and vote, please.
Thank you, sir. We have more public comments this evening.
Hello, Council, Mayor, City Manager. My name is John Dunklin. I stay at 1203 2nd Street. Where I stay has been in our family for 4 to 5 decades. I come here to talk about resident guidebook to city services. I don't know if anybody else has one, but this is the only one that I know that exists. Albion Council is violating city guidebook. Thursday, February 20th, 2020 at 9:30, I tried to make an appointment with the city manager. They told me to leave my phone number. I went back and again in 10 days, no response. Here I stand before you today, still no response. How can you make new laws when the ones we have you don't follow? We the people think that Albion Council should not try to make up any laws if you cannot stand by the ones that are on the books. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other public comments this evening? If not, I'll ask our county commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me for the voice this evening, sorry. Council members, City Manager McCleary, Clerk Domingo, residents of the City of Albion, and folks watching this evening. Gary Tompkins, your county commissioner. It's always great to be with you folks each and every month. I know I'm having a hard time. I go on vacation, and this is what I get, so maybe I shouldn't go on vacation anymore. So, yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So, first and foremost, just want to be real quick here, as quickly as I can. At our last county commission meeting, at our February 20th meeting, we officially approved ballot language for the senior millage renewal. The millage request will be for 10 years. It will remain at the same 0.7452 mils as it has in the past. As we know it covers about $2.7 million of services for our seniors here in Calhoun County, and certainly that'll be showing on your August primary ballot, so something to take into consideration. Now, I also want to talk about that Albion Bridge, that Albion Street Bridge. Ms. Reed, did we not get Senator Bizon and Representative Hodsma down underneath that bridge to take a look at it? And I think they came away with the understanding of the seriousness of the issue there. Obviously, you know that it's been closed down to a one-lane type situation, and I was just glad to see that they did come down and took the opportunity to do so and to see that. Now, the issue we run into is it's easy to look at it, but it's another thing to actually put the money and have those resources there. Under the current funding system, we know that's not something that's absolutely achievable, and even if by them pulling the strings or trying to pull those strings, there is no guarantee that that bridge will be accompanied. So again, as I lead myself into that in terms of that funding plan that I continue to talk about, you need something that's secure and guaranteed funding, and not something that hopefully will happen if your representatives or your senator happens to know the right person to get you the right financing. So again, at what cost will the people of Albion feel if that Albion Street Bridge isn't taken care of, either by shut down permanently or, as I indicated to Representative Hodsma, that a small child could actually fall through the crevice there and into the river, and that's a serious issue. We would hope that something like that wouldn't happen. So I will continue to follow up with that as well, and just wanted to touch base on that. As most of you know, Matt Saxton, our sheriff, is officially going to be retiring and leaving his position on April 18th. There was one individual that applied for that position, Sergeant Detective Stephen Hinckley. So therefore, just by default, I guess, he's the only person to be there. he will be our interim sheriff moving forward whenever that does take place and the official documents will be in place. So, and I would anticipate that he'll probably run this November as well. So just something for you to be aware of, that Stephen Hinckley has a number of years of service, certainly in Calhoun County, and I think he'll do an excellent job for us collectively. As Mr. Dunklin had pointed out, the census, I'll continue to talk about it as well. The county is very heavily involved in the census and understanding the importance of that. So certainly, as March 12th rolls around and you see that little postcard, if you will, that arrive in your mailbox, make sure that those 9 questions get filled out either by mail, by phone, or by internet. And if not, and if you decide you're going to throw it away and not participate, you'll have enumerators that will come see you in about May. They'll be knocking on your door. So, but again, in all seriousness, it is something that is very important, not only for the city of Albion, for the Calhoun County, and also for the state of Michigan, to make sure that we get the accurate count so we get the funding we need for a lot of the services that we depend on. So, my monthly newsletter, most of you folks get that. It was just recently released. Yes, so most of you got it by email. There will be hard copies available at the Albion District Library as well. Again, it's always a great resource to know what's going on around the 7th District. On page 4, you know what I continue to talk about, because it's my favorite issue to talk about. We'll continue to talk about roads and bridges, because that is essentially the function that we're talking about. And we all know that basically, interesting enough, I heard a story at the Michigan Farm Bureau Legislative Conference in Lansing last week that the Speaker of the House, Lee Chatfield, in a crowd of 400 people, was asking the crowd for ideas to change the funding system for roads in the state of Michigan. Now, I will say that's a good thing, because that means it's very much open. So what I did is I sent him an email and correspondence. So we'll see whether or not the Speaker Chatfield will respond. But again, I will indicate as well that I've had traction amongst several other representatives. So hopefully we're going to be able to move forward with that, or at least have some good discussion. So I'll keep you a post of that. Also, too, keep this month, stay tuned, as there'll be some official announcement and some unveiling that'll be happening in the month of March, so stay tuned for that. And again, I will continue to say, keep the pressure on your reps, continue to keep the pressure on your senator to push the envelope and make sure that we do deserve to get the right funding mechanism that we do deserve. Matter of fact, I sent out my newsletter the other day, and I already had a couple of people that subscribed to my newsletter that actually have sent out that correspondence to their representatives, so that's a good thing there. And then finally, page 6, and I know Marcola is gone, Councilmember Lawler's gone, but yes, on page 6, the Union Steel building's coming down. Effective today, it started. It was a collaboration amongst many people, and granted, it was a long time coming, and it deserved to be quicker, but nonetheless, we are here today. And obviously, there are some things in my newsletter for suggestions for people as this is conducted, to make sure that they stay safe and keep their windows closed during this time. And then finally, as the mayor had pointed out regarding, I got this email this afternoon from the Calhoun County Health Department, wanting to make sure that there was no misinformation to be had. But right now, currently, there are zero, and I'm not one of them, believe me, I'm not trying to be the first case. There are no coronavirus cases in the state of Michigan. In all seriousness, it'd be that, but again, it surely feels like it sometimes. And the Calhoun County Health Department wanted to put that memo out to everybody just to make sure that they understood there are no cases here, not only in Calhoun County, but in the state of Michigan at this point in time. Continue to wash your hands, do your due diligence, and obviously if there were any cases to be had, the Calhoun County Health Department would make sure that information would be relayed immediately, with that being said. So a lot of things going on, certainly, as we move forward, but again, we're going to continue to push the road funding. We'll continue to move on as and you talk about Cass Street with its potholes. Interesting enough, and I'll share just a quick story. We had a meeting with the township reps today at the county road department, and they all got maps of their individual township roads, and it was a sea of red because they're all in fail point. And we understand, I think we all understood as we left that meeting, there is currently under the guidelines no solution to fix that problem by any stretch of the imagination unless we do something different. So with that being said, unless there's any questions, it's always great to be with you folks each and every month, and look forward to seeing you furtherwise. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
City Manager's report.
Your Honor, members of council, you've received the City Manager's report for today. I provided you with the update on the North Albion Street Bridge. I did want to note that I have received proposals from our bridge inspection engineering firm as well as the city's engineering firm for preparing the 2023 local bridge program grant application, and I will be presenting that information to council at your March 16th meeting for consideration of award of a contract. I think it's very important that we hire an engineering firm to prepare this next application and to present the best information we can, the best argument we can to get funding for that bridge. I provided you with an update on the Granger Waste Services. There was a question raised about where we're at with that. I have met with Granger Waste Services. They did submit over the weekend their pricing proposal to me. I will be asking council to schedule a work session to receive a presentation from Granger, review their pricing proposal, receive input from residents on the options that are included in the proposal so that we can move forward. And I would hope that we could have this again on the March 16th agenda for council actions. So we will need to schedule that meeting as quickly as possible. I did want to note that in the proposal, there are offerings for new services, including curbside recycling collection, either weekly or biweekly, bulk item collection once per month, and expanded yard waste collection options. Those options will be included in their proposal. I should say proposals. They presented proposals for a 3, 5, and 10-year contract. I noted that the Sidewalk Program Fund Review Committee is scheduled to hold its first meeting on Thursday, March 5th at 6:00 p.m. in the mayor's office.
If I can interject, Mr. Arnold, that's what you were asking about, and you were asking how much the total was. It's around 470, I believe.
430 some thousand.
430, okay.
I believe.
So that's the fund that's being discussed. There's a committee getting together making recommendations.
And yes, there is a separate fund that was set up specifically to account for those funds. So
that's what the committee's going to come back and make recommendations.
I provided you with the update on the Code Enforcement Review Committee. We talked about that tonight. The Rental Inspection Program Study Committee, I did want to note for council that you took no action at your last meeting on that committee. And it's not entirely clear if you're waiting to see what happens with the Code Enforcement Review Committee or what the case may be, but I did want to note for you that that no action was taken on the Rental Inspection Program Committee. Andersen's Ethanol Wastewater Discharge. I did want to address at this time that administration is working with Andersen's Ethanol to make sure that they come into compliance with the city's permit for discharges to the city's sanitary sewer system. I have been informed that none of their discharges to the city's sanitary sewer system over the past 5 years, at least, have resulted in any environmental impact. And I am expecting some additional information from EGLE, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, shortly confirming that information. We did have one episode during a discharge where the wastewater treatment plant on one day exceeded its discharge limit to the river for phosphorus. Our limit is 1 milligram per liter. And on that day, we exceeded it was 1.9. But even according to EGLE, that is not something that would cause an environmental impact. But the information I have right now is it was just that 1 day exceedance. And again, I'll have more information to share with council. I provided you with an update on the city staffing. I've conducted interviews for the Public Works Superintendent and Public Utility Superintendent positions. I'll be making a decision this week on filling those positions. Then we will be working on recruitment and filling of lower level positions within that department. Chief Kipp has received 12 applications for the 4 open public safety officer positions and is moving forward with filling those positions. I've made an offer for the position of Assistant City Manager and Human Resources Director and hope to finalize the terms of an employment agreement and appointment later this week on that position, although that person will not start in that position until right around, well, the first Monday in April.
First Monday what?
In April. The code enforcement officer position in the building code enforcement and planning department is currently open, and Director Tracy hopes to have this position filled within the next few weeks. I noted for council the 2019 audit preparation work. The auditors will begin preliminary work tomorrow and Wednesday, and then will come in and do the bulk of their work during the week of April 6th, and they'll be working out of the mayor's office during that time. I apologize for that, Mayor.
No issue.
I want to congratulate the Brick Street Lofts LLC on receiving approval from the Michigan Strategic Fund Board of Trustees for their grant under the Michigan Community Revitalization Program. They received a $934,000 grant. They also received approval from the state at the same time for $217,000 in state tax capture under the Brownfield Act 381 work plan. That combined with local Brownfield tax capture contributions of an additional $365,000 is a huge benefit to our downtown area. This project will result in an estimated $3 million in capital investment in our downtown to replace the facade on that building, create 8 loft apartments, as well as create upgraded commercial space. So it's an exciting project, and I congratulate them once again. I attended the Chamber Eggs and Issues meeting on February 21st, and thank you so much, Councilor Reed, for your kind invitation and for hosting me for that. I sincerely appreciate that. And once again, I want to note that City Manager's extended office hours are on Thursdays from 5 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. by appointment. And I noted for council some upcoming agenda items that you can expect.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have.
Appreciate it. Any questions for the city manager by council? Okay. Mayor and council member comments? Comments by council members? Okay. Let's see. Mr. Arnold left. He got his answer, I believe. Okay. Mr. Dunklin, the guidebooks, that's probably the last time that thing was produced. It's not an official document with a regulatory status. Most likely what's contained in there is still reflected in our city ordinance, so I'm not saying those things are not, should not be complied with and enforced. They should. But there is no updated resident guidebook. I think you said it was 95? 97. Okay.
So a lot of you made rules and the rules haven't been revised.
Well, ordinances, that's how. All right. That's it. Tomorrow morning, I believe at 9:30, the Habitat for Humanity is going to do the groundbreaking for the home for veterans that they're building, a house for veterans that they're building. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, correction, we need to excuse Councilwoman Lawler.
So if we haven't, maybe that's something that we need to get done for the residents.
What's that?
If there was one, and we no longer have one, then maybe we do need a residential, whatever that book is he's talking about, to hand out to the residents. Why haven't we updated it with the new ordinances and stuff for them to be aware of that?
I don't know. My guess would be that back in '97, it was the last time it was produced, because the ordinance and the charter certainly were not digitized. They were not online and accessible. And that was probably, it wasn't here, but that was probably a document that was created to assist the residents. And there's no record of it. There's no master copy of it. It would be a ground up production. That's certainly something the city manager could look at and let us know what that would cost, and whether or not the council wants to direct that to happen.
Where did that one come from?
City, who knows? I don't know. Okay. Would you please, this is a motion to excuse absent council members. Councilwoman Lawler, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there support? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.